In this video, we're tackling beginner basics for the Traxxas TRX4M. I'm going to answer 5 of the most common questions I get about the Traxxas TRX4M, plus I'm going to give you some bonus content at the end. The TRX4M is a great mini crawler for beginners and seasoned enthusiasts alike, and the aftermarket has really exploded with upgrades and additional parts for these trucks. So whether this is your first TRX4M or your first mini crawler in general, hopefully this video will get you started on the right foot and save you some time and frustration. Now let's kick it off with question number 1. Question number 1 I get asked very frequently is, what tools do you need to use or purchase in order to work on your TRX4M? The 2 core tools that you're going to use the most and that I highly recommend you invest purchasing some good tools for is going to be a 5mm nut driver and a 1.5mm hex driver. These 2 are going to do 90% of everything you need to do on your TRX4M. There are a number of great affordable toolkits out there. I use the Little Guy Racing Parts TRX4M kit because it has all of the sizes that I need for both the SCX24 and the TRX4M. Whether you're new to the crawler game in general or this is your first TRX4M, these trucks are going to use different sized hardware than most other mini crawlers do. That's why I think it's always a good idea when you pick up a new crawler or a new brand is to grab a hardware kit with the specific hardware that goes with that truck. Again, there's aftermarket kits out there. For all the products that I recommend in this video, I'll put the links in the description down below and where you can grab these. Now, the TRX4M also utilizes oil-filled shocks, so it might also be a good idea to pick up some shock oil too to have on hand if you're going to change out your shocks or if you need to refill your stock shocks. I always keep some spare shock oil around. In these mini crawlers, I use a very lightweight. They don't need a whole lot of damping, so I use a 20 weight in mine. Question number 2 is about batteries. What batteries do I like to run in my Traxxas TRX4Ms? I personally still use the stock Traxxas battery quite a bit. A couple of things to note with this battery though. One is that it uses a proprietary plug. Traxxas is like the Apple of mini crawlers. They like to keep a closed system to keep you using their own specific parts. The cost to consumer associated with that can add up. So while the Traxxas TRX4M does come with your basic wall charger, it's always worth the money to invest in a proper LiPo charger, a balanced charger, to ensure safety and longevity for your batteries. So if you're going to keep using the Traxxas TRX4M battery, Traxxas does offer an adapter for this plug that plugs into their own specific balance chargers. Now, a decent balance charger is going to help you keep your batteries balanced, just like the name implies. It's also going to help you store them. It ensures that you charge them at a safe voltage, and it's overall just faster and more reliable than your basic wall charger. For batteries with that pH 2.0 connector, some of my favorites are the Ovonic. I like these little Ovonic 300 milliamp batteries. Very small footprint here. If you want to run 3S, which is a whole nother world, I like these Spectrum 300 milliamp 3S batteries. Just remember to invest the time and effort into learning proper LiPo safety and storage. It's really critical to learn to take care of these batteries for overall safety. Question number 3, arguably the most common question that I get asked, is about torque twist. The TRX4M is very prone to torque twist. I've done a whole video on steps to mitigate torque twist. I'll link that down below as well. But essentially, torque twist is when you're under power, either going forward or backwards, you get a severe lean in your chassis. That can upset your truck, causing you to topple over in some cases. Even if you don't topple over, it's generally an annoying feature of these trucks. Traxxas has included with the stock TRX4M shock spacers that slide in over your spring in the rear passenger side shock. The whole purpose of that was to catch the lean, stiffen up that right rear shock to try and catch the twist. But despite putting that spacer in, oftentimes it's not enough, especially if you add an upgraded motor or weight to your build can amplify torque twist. So I encourage you to check out my full-length video on torque twist mitigation, but I'll give you some quick pointers here. I mentioned the oil-filled shocks, and that I run 20 weight in my shocks for the most part. A good way to mitigate torque twist is to put thicker oil in that right rear shock. Whichever corner that you're getting the torque twist in. Generally, you're going to see torque twist in your rear passenger side and your front driver's side. So you can put thicker shock oil in there. I wouldn't recommend going much higher than a 35 weight, 50 max, depending on how heavy your build is. Another way is to get aftermarket shocks that have coilover adjustment on it. So nearly all aftermarket shocks that you can get for the Traxxas TRX4M have varying spring rates. So you can swap out stiff and soft springs in different corners to see if you can chase it down that way. And you can also take advantage of the preload adjustment on these shocks to stiffen up the corner where you're seeing the twist. But again, these trucks are very prone to torque twists, and it's a really tricky thing to get rid of entirely, but those are some quick steps to help you mitigate it. Again, check out my video below on a really in-depth look at how to get rid of torque twist. Another question that I get asked pretty frequently and got asked a ton about early on when the TRX4M was first released is about binding at full steering lock. Now, one of the selling features of the TRX4M when it was first released was a really aggressive steering angle. At 45 degrees, it gave you a really great turning radius. One of the things that many customers were running into was that at full lock, the tires would bind up on the links. Now, thankfully, this is a pretty easy fix. There's a couple different ways to solve this. Primarily, you're just going to add width to your wheels so that you can bump your wheels out away from your linkage. You can do that in a number of different ways. You can add aftermarket wheels that have a good negative offset. The negative offset is going to bring the wheel out away from the linkage. You can pick up a set of hex extensions, which is a really easy and inexpensive way to add width to your truck, get those wheels away from the chassis. Endura actually addressed this pretty early by offering very slightly extended hexes. I think they were only a +2 millimeter, and that's all you need to solve this issue. You just need to bump those wheels out just slightly enough. Very early on, I had a subscriber, shout out to you Gramps if you're watching, was 3D printing these very, very thin disc-like spacers to put over the hexes, and that was enough. So you don't need much. All you need is just a little bit of space to give those wheels some more room to clear your linkage at full lock. And the fifth and final question that I'm going to address here is about the stock electronics on the TRX4M. This is mostly around people who want to go with a brushless motor upgrade in the TRX4M, or if they want to plug in an external ESC. The question inevitably becomes, do these things work with the stock Traxxas electronics? The answer is no, they do not. Remember, going back to the Traxxas closed system, Traxxas doesn't play nice with other manufacturers, and that includes electronics. So if you want to go with a brushless motor, you're going to need a brushless ESC, and those do not plug into the stock electronics. You're going to have to overhaul the whole setup. That also goes if you want to run 3S power. Virtually any aftermarket electronics upgrade is going to require a complete overhaul. Now, that doesn't mean you have to break the bank to do so. There's been a number of great aftermarket accessories, ESCs, and combos at very affordable prices. A great option is the Endura MB100 brushed ESC. For 21 bucks, this thing will unlock a ton of functionality in your build. You do have to pair this with a new radio, but again, you can grab something like the Little Guy Racing Parts radio or one of Endura's radio combos for around 30 bucks. So for about 50 bucks, you completely overhaul your electronics and open up a whole new world of crawling ability. And as of recently, Endura has entered the brushless game and offers a complete plug-and-play kit for the TRX4M, less a remote, for 70 bucks. FuryTech is also working on some low-cost options for the TRX4M too. So a complete overhaul of your electronics is no longer a super expensive upgrade. In fact, it is one of the best bang for the buck upgrades that you can get because it just gives you so much control, tuning ability, and opens the door for huge power upgrades. Alright guys, those were 5 of some of the most common questions that I get asked about the TRX4M. But we're not quite done yet. I'm going to give you guys some extra sauce here, some bonus content. This is going to be for those of you who are trying to get more axle drop out of your front end, more articulation, more flex out of your TRX4M. A very common question that I get, and one that I sought to answer myself when I first got the TRX4M, was how do you get the most flex out of it? How do you get the most articulation out of this chassis? The tricky part with the TRX4M is how the servo mount is designed and how the front upper links mount. What you will invariably run into with the TRX4M is that what stops your axle drop in the front is your upper links bind with the servo mount. Some of the things that I did personally was just experiment with different brands of links. I actually found that the stock upper links seem to work really well. They're plastic, they have a little more give, they're also a little thinner, so you're going to get a little more movement in there. But ultimately, that design is going to limit your vertical axle drop. Now, you can still get outrageous side-to-side articulation. You can do that with your long travel shocks, manipulating your shock position. To do that, I would suggest you get an aftermarket chassis kit. You can grab something like the Endura carbon fiber LCG kit, very inexpensive. It's going to give you a ton of shock placement options to customize your ride height. And it's also going to allow your servo to drop and kind of pivot underneath your frame rails, because that's one of the other things that you're going to run into is the vertical mounting of the Traxxas servo will collide with your frame rails. So an aftermarket chassis kit like the FuryTech Grasshopper does a great job here. Something that'll allow your axle to drop and your servo to pivot underneath it will give you that outrageous flex. Another tip that I would recommend is, even if you don't want to overhaul your chassis, you can also buy shock keys for these. Because of the modular design of the shock towers on the TRX4M chassis, it's really easy to swap out the shock mounts. A lot of folks 3D print their own and sell them for very, very inexpensive prices on Etsy and eBay and things alike. Those shock keys will give you a lot of versatility in your shock mounting, again, so you can customize your ride height and your shock placement as you see fit, but maintain the stock chassis. One last thing going to the linkage. One thing that I've been experimenting with lately is mounting the upper links on the outside of the servo mount. Now, I still find that I get the binding with the upper links, but that does seem to allow for a little bit more axle drop and a little more freedom of movement in those upper links to give you more side-to-side articulation in the front end. But nonetheless, those are the tips that I've used: the shock keys, aftermarket chassis, manipulating the linkage, trying different linkages, all to kind of give me as much movement as possible in the front end there. But ultimately, still ran into limiting factors with that design. But if you've seen from my previous posts and some of my other builds, you can still get outrageous articulation with this thing. Alright guys, that's going to do it for beginner basics for the Traxxas TRX4M. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it helped you. I hope you found some value in it. If there's anything else that you'd like to see me cover, drop a comment down below. I'm happy to dive into things in more detail or do a follow-up video to this. And remember too, with a new truck, the experimentation and the tinkering and the tuning is part of the fun. So I encourage you just to get in there, start messing around, start experimenting with different shock placements, linkages, motor combinations, all those things. It's a great way to learn your rig inside and out and have a lot of fun doing it. As always, guys, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done so, and I'll see you in the next video.